Yeah, let's just get this one started. Thank you very much, Joel, for offering to do this presentation for us here at the Icelandic Power Platform User Group. And yeah, talk about licensing as part of the design. I think this, I suspect, this is an area that, well, many of us and many of the people out there underestimate. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, mate. It's been a while since I've done one of these. However, Iceland is one of my favourite places in the world. We came to Iceland in February, and it is absolutely breathtaking as a country in so many ways. So yes, it felt kind of nice and appropriate that this was my first foray into presenting in a while in one of my favourite places. A little bit gutted though that this isn't in person. I'll just put that out there. that would have been good. So anyway,
Yeah.
right, licensing is part of design. So we are going to talk for the next few minutes about how licensing should, or why licensing should be important really early on in the project that you are doing. Before we go into that, we'll do a bit of a boring intro on myself. Who am I? I am a Power Platform architect and technical consultant. So I've been doing solution architecture for the Microsoft Power Platform for Dynamics 365 for about 14 years now, since way back in Dynamics CRM version 4. For those relics of this platform that can remember that. And I'm a Power Platform licensing provider. So I work with companies to help them understand how to get the most from their licensing. This isn't going to be a sales pitch, by the way, but this is just bringing to the community some of the principles that I feel are really important and that can hopefully help everyone, no matter how they get their licenses, make good choices. Well, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so hopefully this won't be too boring. And I also have worked with some pretty decent sized companies in the UK to help them. So anyway, enough about me. So let's start with some radical honesty, shall we? No one finds licensing exciting. To be frank, it is as boring can possibly be. And you know what? It doesn't help that Power Platform, and to me anyway, is the polar opposite of that. It's incredibly exciting to use as a platform. The innovations that we see coming through with Copilot everywhere, or starting to reach everywhere across the platform, enabling AI enhancement so that we can do different things. You've got Power Automate, we've got Power Apps, all these different cool things that we can do, and yet licensing is so boring. It's often the reason why it's a bit of an afterthought. But imagine turning to your colleague and saying you're coming to a talk today about licensing. I think we all know the response you would get. It would be, why? Why on earth are you going to a talk on licensing? Because it'll be pretty dry. Why is that though? Why is it such a dry topic? Well, we have the two documents that can help us. So we have the Dynamics 365 licensing guide. Surely if Microsoft have provided a document that can help us understand it, that makes it easier. Sadly not. 61 pages of intricate details in the Dynamics 365 licensing guide with no less than 10 appendices. And the best part of it is, that doesn't even cover Power Platform. Power Platform has its own licensing guide, 34 pages, and a measly, it should be embarrassed, 3 appendices. It's crazy. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of fantastic detail in there, and we will look at a little bit of detail towards the end of the presentation. But these are not page turners. They are hard to understand, particularly for users. For someone like myself who's worked with the platform for years, they're still hard to understand, and yet for end users, they've got no chance. Excuse me.
Yeah, and yeah, I might add to this, since as I say, I've worked actively on consulting on licenses. These guides aren't even, that's not the whole truth. You have to go to the terms and conditions on each and every application as well. So there might be something. So yes, this is big.
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. And oftentimes there's subtext in what Microsoft say. You can see kind of where they're going with some of the decisions, but they're not quite there yet. So you have to kind of understand the wider landscape, which taking us back to this point is that that's really hard for users to do. It's really hard for end users, it's hard for us to do. So it's hard for end users. So the question is then, why are we wasting time talking about this? Shouldn't we all just have a coffee, have a chat for half an hour and call it a day? Why should licensing matter to the community and to us? Well, the short and simple reason is that your decisions that you make for when it comes to licensing can make or break your project. Drama. Now, is that me being overly dramatic? Absolutely not. We're going to look at a number of lessons that I've learned over various projects. I'm not going to obviously say who, but I'm going to give you examples of where a lack of consideration when it comes to licensing has been a massive risk on projects and how we've managed to get around that. So we're going to look at this as we go through it. So first of all, when should you start? By the way, I like a meme. Can you tell? So yeah, there'll be these peppered throughout. When should you start thinking about licensing? Well, if we think about it, most projects will start by someone going on LinkedIn and saying, "Oh, Power Apps, what's that?" I'm talking from a user point of view. They'll say, "Oh, Power Apps, that sounds interesting. Let's have a little look." Might chat to a colleague about it. Start a trial, as Microsoft want us to do everywhere. Start here, start there. And they'll have a play with it and think this is really good. They start building some apps. This is great. We can do this for ourselves. They'll make a business case to the business. They might even engage with a Microsoft partner or get some internal resource in. They might even buy a few licenses directly from Microsoft just to tide them over while they're doing the development. It goes through UAT. And then what happens is just before go live, someone says, "Have we got the licenses for this platform? Have we sorted the licenses yet?" Now, why is that a problem? Well, the reason is because licensing should inform your design from day one of the project. Now, why is that important? Well, let's look at an example to show exactly why that's important. I worked with a UK training company. Oh, hello. We're going too fast here. Let's see. Right. I worked with a UK. So we're going to stop there. Oh, PowerPoint is killing me here. Right. Anyway, what with the UK training company? I'll talk through these. Who their needs were that they needed a system that could essentially capture training requirements from their customers. They would need to link a training requirement with a trainer and get that trainer to site. So not a massively complex thing, just this person gets to this training course. And then there was a very little financial information recorded on it. So it was not, they weren't putting sales orders through there, they weren't doing invoicing from it. So what happened? Well, a partner came along and said, "We'll build your system." The first thing they did was they took the sales order entity and completely repurposed it into a training request entity. So they didn't start a new one. They took the sales order entity, completely rebadged it, gutted it, and called it training requests. Secondly, they took the invoice entity, gutted it, and made it serve the purpose of checking when a training request had gone into the account system. Now you might think, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the reality is that ended up that they were then tied into a sales license. Now, we both know that a sales license is 4 times at least the cost of a Power Apps license. So the impact on their project was massive. And unfortunately, they were tied into that. There was nothing they could do about it. So for that reason, then, as we said, licensing should inform your design from the start. We need to, sorry, PowerPoint is killing me here today. We need to make sure that right at the start, when we're doing the architecture design, or even if you're a user and you're just playing about with it, you need to think to ourselves, well, how is this going to scale? What am I using and what will licenses will be needed for that? And we'll look at a bit more at that in a bit more in a second. Second point we want to look at really is that accurate information is absolutely critical. Now, we talked about the licensing guides and how they were really important and a great source of information. But how many of you knew about the licensing guides before you came to this today? Raise your hand on Teams. One. Okay. Well, that's a good start. How many of you have read in full the licensing guide? Yep, none of us. Oh, yeah, very good, very good, very good. I know. How many of you could say that you fully understand what is in the hand? The hand goes down. That what is in the license guide? Exactly. They're so hard to comprehend sometimes that it's almost impossible to say that we understand it. Adding to that, the licensing guides often change regularly, usually once a year, sometimes more than that. And that makes it a real challenge to get a clear picture of that Microsoft licensing landscape, doesn't it? Also, how do you buy your licenses? Now, hands up if you have purchased licenses via the admin portal on Office or Microsoft 365. Anyone done that before? One, yeah, I've done that. Yeah, very good. The trouble is, it makes it so easy, doesn't it? We go in, we search for Power Apps or Dynamics, whatever it might be, and it gives us the license there. But in reality, how much guidance are you being given about the appropriateness of that license for what you're trying to do? Little to none. Yeah, exactly. Zero. You're quite right. However, put your hand up if you've purchased your licenses for a project via a partner, because that's the other route you could go down. Yeah, even less. Now, the purchasing licenses via partner has some benefits. Obviously, the partner knows Dynamics, hopefully. So we'd think that'd be great. Ideal, really, because they're going to give us guidance. The trouble is, and I'm saying this having worked for a couple of partners, Microsoft partners, often the focus for the partner is in the profitability of the build and additional services that they will provide, not the licensing. And that means that often licensing is as much an afterthought for them as it is for you. I've been present with many conversations with partners about to deliver a big project, and someone has asked that question, well, have we sorted the licenses for this yet? And also, it's quite common to find a lack of the knowledge of the impact of licensing in solution architects, people who are designing these solutions. I've been guilty of that myself years ago. Before I got to know about licensing and its impacts, I was very much guilty of just having it as an afterthought. But that shouldn't be the case. Let's give another example of how this can be a bit dangerous. Let's see if PowerPoint's going to kill me today. It is. Whoa, it's not liking me, this, is it? So we had a customer who had to deal with the API limit changes that came in a few years ago. They heard that these changes were coming, so they thought, I'll Google it and read up on it. What did they find? They found the Microsoft press release, which they read through, thought this doesn't really apply to us, no problem. They then read a blog article on it and thought, no, definitely doesn't apply to us. They spoke to their partner at the time, who also said, nah, it shouldn't be a problem for you. The trouble was there was a piece of custom development that was hitting 30,000 API calls a day that they weren't aware of because they didn't have good architecture documentation. So it meant that, yes, this was a problem. It was going to be a problem for them. So how do we deal with that? Well, we actually ended up re-architecting areas of the system so that they would use less API calls. But we were able to pick that up for them quickly and deal with that before the system went live. But imagine all of a sudden they're getting emails from Microsoft billing them for all these API calls and no one knows why. So it's absolutely important that you have accurate information on how these things will impact you. And even when you feel informed, it's important to build a relationship with a licensing partner. Now, what do we mean by licensing partner? Well, we might think we've got a partner who's building a system for us. Maybe they've even provided some training. But a licensing partner or a Microsoft partner who specializes in licensing is a good relationship to have and a good resource for you to build. The reason why is because if they specialize in it, they will know and understand the intricacies of how your particular solution will weave together in the licensing landscape. Other partners may be great at building or delivering solutions, but if they don't have that knowledge, then that's going to cause you a problem. Now, that's not to say you can't have multiple partners. In fact, I would recommend that if you even have an absolutely brilliant partner who's delivered some really good work for you, you could still have a licensing partner that works together. The licensing partner can work with your, let's say, your delivery partner to provide them the information they need on your behalf. So getting a licensing partner as part of your team is really important. Third point we're going to look at is being license efficient. You see, licensing has a sweet spot. It's a bit like buying a car. You know, there's at one end, you want something with 4 wheels and a steering wheel that moves. At the other end, you've got Ferraris. Now, what we want is we want to look at our circumstances and find the car that's right for us, our sweet spot. Well, licensing is quite similar. You want to have access to all the functionality you need, but at a minimum cost. And that's where this concept of license efficiency comes from. Now, so many customers, so many people who use the platform will be sitting there with 300 customer engagement licenses, not because they need the full functionality of the platform, but because they have an imperfect understanding of how the licensing landscape can be fulfilled with their needs. But the trouble is, we said earlier, that both of those things are moving targets. The licensing landscape changes regularly, and by the same token, your business needs change regularly, the requirements that you have in the system. So it can be a challenge to make sure that you are finding and paying for the licenses and storage that you need as opposed to more than that. In fact, one client that I worked with not that long ago, we were helping them out review their system. And they found that they had been, for over a year, they had been paying for full Dynamics licenses and by extension Power Platform licenses for people who had left the company. But what's even more crazy is during that time, they bought new licenses for people who joined the company. So they're buying more licenses while paying for ones for people who don't. It's madness. But that's why what can you do about this? We need to do a licensing review. And this is something anyone can do. You can do it for yourself. You can get a partner to do it for you. But there's 5 key questions that you need to ask. Do all my licensed users actually use the system? And why is that important? Well, because you'd be shocked at the amount of times that you could log into a customer's tenant and find that they've got 100 licenses all assigned to different users. But actually those users maybe log in once a year, if that. So how many of my users actually use the system, those licensed users? And then what we do is we narrow it down. We take that group of users and we say, so what functionality do those individuals who are actually using the system require in real life? Not what did the original design say, what have they actually ended up using? Do they use the sales entities? Do they use all these API calls for Power Automate that we've purchased? What are they actually using in real life? And then once we've narrowed that down a bit further, what licenses then do I need for each user? And it's good to get as granular as you can with that. For example, it may be that certain functionality is required within a team, but all the team don't need that functionality. That may have an impact on your license, and you could save some money on buying sort of a Power Apps license for most of the team and adding an extension on for maybe one individual within the team. Do you have a license gap where actually they need functionality that you're not yet licensed for? So you're looking at it the other way as well. And then what's the most cost-effective solution? Because the most cost-effective solution might not be to buy a bigger license or a better license or a more expansive one. There's a client who we worked with and they had an issue where they needed to buy customer service licenses, it was in the end. But when we actually sat down with them and said, well, why do you want to do this? And they said, well, we want to be able to record when our customers call in and what they call in about. Essentially, without going into too much detail, they had their client base would call in and record that something had happened, and all they needed was to track that against the customer record and record the phone call against it. We said to them, well, you could go out and buy customer service licenses, but the investment for your 700 users would be enormous when it comes to licensing. Instead, we built them a small model-driven Power App with some very simple custom entities. And in doing so, it meant that they went from needing 700 customer service licenses at 80 whatever pound per user it is now, all the way down to a per app license that was at the time of £7 per user. So what's the point we're making here is, well, the point is that actually it may be better to look at investing a smaller amount in some development work to get the system working the way you want than simply saying, we need this, let's go and buy licenses that allow us to do that. Because actually, when you analyze what you actually need, it can be much more efficient. So that's those 5 questions, and I would encourage anyone and everyone to be considering these. And it's so important, because the last thing you want is to have worked so hard on your project, on getting it through all the stages of approval, etc., and then it fall at the end because of poor licensing choices. So what I'd say is, with your licensing partner, make sure you review it regularly. Don't just review what you're doing now. Talk through your roadmap. Where do you want to take the platform? What things have you got coming up? What areas of the business are you going to expand this into? And ask your licensing partner for support in understanding how is that going to affect our licensing needs going forward. And how you can do that is shown here by these 2 graphics that we've got here. So on the left, this is what most people do, okay? So they will come to a project and they'll say, what functionality do we require? Usually that's the motivation for them going out into the marketplace and getting a solution like the Power Platform. But as people learn what it can do, etc., what happens? Well, the request for functionality grows beyond just what's required. Sadly, a lot of organizations and a lot of partners even will then take the view of, well, let's look at everything you've possibly requested and license you beyond that, just to be safe, to make sure you're covered. Is that the approach you should take? No. When you are planning your pipeline or your future growth phases for your platform, the first thing you should do is analyze that requested functionality. So it's great. We don't want to stop people from looking at the wider platform and saying, hey, you realize it can do this, you realize it can do this, and asking for that to be incorporated. But then once you have that, the request circle here on the right that we're seeing, we want to then say, okay, so what is required, and then license what is required, because you can always upgrade your licenses. You can't get the money back for licenses you've wasted. Now, just talk you through some recent updates. So we have oh my goodness. So we have the Power Apps updates. So just a couple of them from the licensing guide. Not going to go into loads of detail and intricacies of the updates that are there, because that's not the purpose of this session. But just so you've got a bit of a steer and a bit of a takeaway. So Power Apps, you'll notice if you go onto Microsoft's website and try and buy a Power Apps license, you used to be able to see pay-as-you-go, Power Apps per user, and Power Apps per app license, those 3 things. Now, if you go, you'll only find one, Power Apps Premium licensing. And that's $20 per user per month. Gives you access to Dataverse, a whole load of other things, including as many apps as you can consume, etc. Now, just so you're aware, if you look at the licensing guide, the other types of apps are actually still there, and you can still buy those. You just can't buy them directly on that Microsoft website. So a lot of people have kind of looked at that and gone, oh my goodness, where have they gone? They are still there, but Microsoft are just trying to encourage people to use the Power Apps Premium license. The reason for that is because so many people buy the per user or the standard license, or maybe they're using the Power Apps licensing that comes with their Microsoft 365 account, and they're getting excited about the platform, and then realizing that they can only use standard connectors in Power Automate and a light version of Dataverse. So by pushing the Power Apps Premium license to the front, Microsoft are kind of overcoming that because they're helping people right from the start to have access to all these premium connectors. Microsoft also, just on subject to Power Apps, is incentivizing businesses to buy bigger when it comes to licensing. Power Apps, when it started, was almost a bit of a niche product in businesses where, did you need to build your own app? Come and buy Power Apps. Whereas Microsoft are really pushing that get as many people, everyone should have a Power Apps license, because what that enables you to do is enables people to build their own licenses, which of course is great, but also it allows you to not have to worry about licensing when you are developing new solutions, because everyone's already licensed for it. And the recent update that shows how they're helping to do that is if you buy 2,000 or more seats of Power Apps Premium, you get a 40% discount off the normal $20. Now, 2,000 seats is a lot. It's a lot. But when you consider the discount you can get for bigger organizations, it could definitely be worth it. When it comes to Power Automate, which you can see on screen here, Power Automate has changed much more significantly, not massively, but more significantly than Power Apps. We've had a bit of a rename, shocker, where we now have Power Automate Premium licensing. Now, Power Automate Premium licensing, that's not just the previous Power Automate per user license, but it's actually quite a significant capacity upgrade you now get with that. Essentially, what they've done is they've taken Power Automate per user with unattended RPA extension, which was £40 per user, dollars per user per month, and they've turned that into Power Automate Premium and replaced it with $15 per month now. So you've not got the unattended RPA or robotic process automation that you have as an extension, but you've got all of the rest of the functionality that you had with Power Automate per user. But now, instead of $40 per month, it's now $15 per month. So that's a big upgrade that we've given there. You also have, in addition to previous stuff, you've also got Process Advisor, AI Builder. If you haven't looked yet at the new AI Copilot experience for Power Automate, it's really cool, some of the stuff you can do with it, so it's definitely worth doing that. You can also now get full access to the Process Mining suite of tools as well, and Processor, which is an enhancement on the previous Process Advisor offering that came with the license. So that's just, there are a couple of other changes, but that just gives you a flavour for why it's important to understand the licensing guide. So the licensing guide, we started off kind of dissing it and saying how boring it is, and it is. It's dry. It's a dry read, but some of the benefits that are out there, if you understand it, are pretty huge. Okay, so any questions? Does anyone have any questions about licensing, life, the universe, anything else? No? That's either a really good thing or a really bad thing.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Shan, if you were trying to talk.
Sorry, I don't know if this is like a really dumb question.
No, there are no dumb questions.
But I know we've spoken about, like, for instance, so with the licensing, I know you mentioned kind of like Power Apps or like the Power Platform, and then also we spoke about like sales and you need licensing for that. Is it that you have to get licensing for every module? Because I know like with Dynamics, it's like sales, marketing.
That's right.
Whatever the rest are.
Yeah, no. So when I was referring to kind of sales customer service, that was the Dynamics apps essentially.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But when it comes to Power Apps, you have those three licensing choices still: pay as you go, per user, and Power Apps. Not per user, pay as you go. Sorry, per app and Power Apps Premium. So once you've got that, you've kind of unlocked the platform.
Okay.
What you don't have is some of the functionality that the Dynamics 365 apps offer. Yeah, it's part of that. But you do have the bare bones of it all, the core dataverse entities, the common data model as well. So that's where people should be starting. I'm a great believer. I've worked with Dynamics for years. I firmly believe everyone, as part of their design, should be starting with the Power Platform, designing on Power Apps, and then looking to these extensions or these other Dynamics apps should they need. One thing just for you specifically, Shan, because you deal with a lot of education customers.
Only, yeah.
Yeah, so the educational discounts is another thing that you would need to understand in public pricing that's not publicly exposed in the way that the standard pricing is. The educational discounts are massive, absolutely massive. So definitely worth reaching out to a licensing partner if you get questions about that.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes as well you'll get good combinations of licenses, so you might be able to get an add-on for cheaper because you're buying Power Apps licenses as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And how often would you need to like renew licenses?
So generally speaking, most people will renew their licensing agreement once a year. For most people.
Okay.
Some people will sign a multi-year agreement. I have a slightly different view on that. I think licensing partners should be providing flexible agreements that allow you to flex the licenses you require, because 9 times out of 10, especially if you're buying it through a CSP like myself, what happens is you can add and remove licenses on a monthly basis. But oftentimes that's not passed on to the customers. They'll sign them up for a year and say they're committed to buying that for a year, and that's economies of scale. But I think there's great power in being able to build a relationship with a licensing partner where you can say, we need these licenses today, we might need more, we might need less tomorrow, we might need different licenses, and giving them the flexibility to buy that as they need it.
I was thinking that. I was wondering if you was kind of like locked in, or if you could, like, for instance, if you got the license and realized you didn't really maybe need it,
Yeah,
you know, in the future or whatnot.
Different types of licensing agreement. If you go direct with Microsoft and do an enterprise level agreement, you'll be more locked in there. But that's why I think the cloud solution provider program is so good, because you're working with people who actually have used and deployed the system and know what's required for it. So, and then can give you that flexibility to change your licensing and how you pay for it as well.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
And whose responsibility is it to do the licensing? Because I appreciate you're talking about it right now. I know you're a solution architect, so would it be your job to do it?
So hot take here. I think yes, I think it is, because to me, a solution architect is brought onto a project because they're the one who takes the requirements of the business and, I won't have putting it better, architects a solution for them that says this is how it should work. What happens with it then is that then the developers will take that and build it. So really, as solution architect, you're the stopgap, you're the checkpoint for everything to do with it: storage, licenses, development requirements, all that. And I'm not saying that should, every solution architect needs to be a licensing expert. That's not practical or realistic. But every solution architect should be, when they're looking at their design, should be saying, what is it going to cost to run this design? And that is your licensing cost. So I think for any project to have a good solution architect, if they've got a good solution architect, they will take responsibility for analysing what's needed. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
But you raise an interesting question, actually, because oftentimes what can happen is the solution architect will come along, do the system, get the licenses, and then sail off into the sunset if they're a contractor, especially, or a partner. It raises the question of who's responsible for managing that going forward, the requirement going forward. And that is often where it falls down, because they leave behind, say, a product owner or a program director, whatever you want to, depending on how senior you go, who doesn't really understand it, doesn't really know where to get the knowledge. And you go back in 3 years and they've just been adding licenses, like they're collecting stickers. So I would suggest that it would be a good thing for when you get to sort of a BAU stage of a project to understand who then is responsible for licensing going forward. And again, good licensing partner will help you out with that.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting because a lot of like, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of my clients, they don't necessarily bring solution architects in right at the beginning, even though we advise it, they don't.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, and then a couple of my clients, for instance, where they don't have that knowledge in-house, like projects have been delayed, and then I don't know if this is across the board, but I think there's like deadlines for maybe, I don't know if it's deadlines for the licensing or deadlines for like discount for licensing. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I know that some clients have
Sometimes,
like missed deadlines, and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, what can often happen is
Mhm.
I had this with a client not that long ago where they had I was in doing solution architecture for them. They had another licensing partner, and basically because the licensing partner had signed them up to an annual agreement, they had a deadline to sign that agreement. But when we peeled back, the cover, what we actually found was the deadline wasn't with Microsoft; it was with the partner. It was the way they worked. So yeah, I'm, and the trouble was they were looking to they'd got 3 instances of Dynamics. They were looking to re-architect what they were doing into a Power Apps model using the Power Apps Power Platform. The trouble is they were to sign up for another year's worth of Dynamics licensing when in truth they probably didn't need it. So that's why I think license partners should offer flexibility, the ability to say, well, do you know what, we're going to run on for a month or two with these, and then we're going to adjust it up down. So it's yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you for that.
No worries.
It's a good point you made in the presentation, Joel, about starting small, because
Yeah.
it's easier to add on rather than to scale down. It's the same as you're doing cooking. If you put too much salt in the sauce,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to take it out rather
Yeah.
than just add gradually and taste it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's a good point.
Start with the cheapest few of the cheapest licenses that are on offer and see what that does. And then, if you're unsure, if you don't know, then start small and then just grow it gradually as you go along.
And that's such a good point, because I think most people would be really shocked at what they could do with a standard Power Apps license.
Yeah.
I think they would be really surprised to see the capabilities of that license offering. And actually, it may even be the case, as I've definitely seen this with clients before, where they say we need Dynamics for sales because we're a sales organization, and we need this. And you convince them to take a look at Power Apps and say, right, so let's look at what you actually need. And as you walk them through it, it leaves them like a tiny slither of requirements that actually is the gap. And in the end, they look at that and go, well, that's not worth 4 times the investment in licensing. And they ditch it. And actually, what seems so critical now in context really isn't. So yeah, so starting small works.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, well, thank you guys for listening to me prattle on about licensing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You'll see there's a QR code on there. Hopefully it works.
It works. I just verified it.
Brilliant. That will take you to a page where you can download the presentation, you can connect with myself, etc. So if you do want to do that, give it a go. But thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Joel. And I'll put the recording on YouTube, and it will also be accessible here on the meeting.
Oh, fabulous.
All right. Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
guys. Have a good day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thanks for coming,
Bye.
Sean.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.
Yes, bye. Bye.